Now calling to order the Thursday, December 9th, 2021 meeting of the Mashpee Conservation Commission. Is there anyone in the audience who has business that they would like heard that is not on this agenda? Seeing none, Drew, I'll hand it over to you for the pre and post items.
Sure. Go with one of the shorter items first. So you're all sent the proposed 2022 meeting calendar, and this is protocol with all town commissions and boards. You have to make a motion, second, and approve the proposed meeting calendar for 2022. Or if there's any discussion on the meeting dates.
Is there any discussion about the 2022 calendar for our meetings?
Where was it published? Did we receive it in our mailboxes?
Email.
It was emailed.
Downstairs?
Email.
Email?
Yeah.
Okay. Do some digging.
If there's no discussion about our 2022 calendar, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Move the acceptance of the proposed 2022 meeting calendar.
If there's no discussion, we'll hear a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes.
Do you want maybe do a roll call vote for that, just because we didn't hear Alex or Charlie?
Oh, I gotcha.
Yeah. We have a full commission here tonight, so.
Very good. I'll redo that as a roll call vote, since we have people on the web, as I have been for the last year. Voting, Brian,
Yes.
Tom,
Aye.
Brad,
Aye.
Charlie,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Alex.
Yes.
I vote aye as well. Motion carries.
Thank you. We can move into the first agenda item.
Thank you.
Here is, Caitlin passes the plans out.
Thank you, Caitlin. Now calling to order the 6 o'clock hearing for Dale A. Doherty, 192 Ninigret Ave, proposed permitting of existing seasonal dock. The representative is the homeowner, and this is an RDA. If you could come forward to the microphone, introduce yourself for the record, and speak your piece.
I'm Dale Doherty from 192 Ninigret Ave in Mashpee.
Thank you. If you could tell us a bit about your project?
Well, when we bought the property back in '87, the previous homeowner gave us numbers and said this was your dock permit numbers. And so we never really thought about it much, other than whenever it came up, somebody would say, well, you've got something, and so we'd put the numbers out on the end of the dock. So we went to sell the property this year, and it came up through the attorneys that the previous homeowner's attorney apparently never attached it to our deed. So I've had a dock sitting here in and out of the water every single year. And then I think it was about 8 years ago, they had some indigenous clams in the lake. And they told me that I couldn't put the dock in, so I went to the harbor master and asked him, what can I do with this dock? And he said, float it. And so that's what I did. I put 2 moorings out there and I floated the dock. But now it comes up that the ramp is on the conservation land, and that has to have a permit for that. And so that's why I'm here.
Thank you. Drew, comments?
Not much more to add. Is so the purpose of this is really just to get the existing structure on record. It's been around a while. Town staff has been familiar with it. State Natural Heritage weighed in on it already. So at this point, we recommended the most expedient way to get this into compliance is through an RDA to recognize the existing footprint. There were just a couple of things that popped up. That first was when our assistant agent went out to measure the dock. You have it measured as 4 foot by 32 foot. She measured it was 40 feet in?
It is 40 feet.
Yeah.
That's a mistake.
Okay. So if we can,
I was thinking that the dock itself is 42, the floating portion.
right.
And then the 8 feet of a ramp,
okay,
the 4x8. And that's why it shows a 4x8 ramp at the end.
okay.
Yeah, so it's 40 feet plus the 8-foot ramp. That's what
No, it's 40 feet total.
that's what I measured on the property.
Yeah.
I measured the actual pier, I mean, the actual floating dock structure itself as 40 feet, and then the 8-foot ramp was on top of it, correct?
And no, I don't believe that's, well, let me see, 16, 16, and 8. You are correct.
So it's 48?
It's 48.
Okay, okay.
'Cause
okay.
there's-
I measured a couple times, just
Yeah,
to be
there's
sure.
there's two
Just measured
16-foot
twice, got one,
sections and an
right, yeah.
8-foot section, and then another 8-foot section. So yes, a total of 48.
So we'll just ask for a revised plan that just reflects the accurate measurements.
Okay?
Thank you.
And the other comment we had is that whenever we encounter a float, whether it's seasonal, inland, coastal, that has exposed styrofoam like this, we ask that an effort be made to encapsulate it so that the styrofoam, because it's a recognized problem with docks throughout the Commonwealth, that styrofoam chips apart, particularly in the wintertime, or even in the summertime during storms, and it becomes marine-borne or waterborne debris, which can have a pretty significant impact on wildlife, particularly waterfowl. So we do ask that an effort be made to encapsulate this before it goes back into the water for the next boating season.
You know, that I will take up with the new owner.
Sure. Okay.
To
Just want to put it out
encapsulate
there
that.
for your consideration, because it is something that we recognize as an issue.
Yeah.
So whenever we have an opportunity to address it, that's why we.
Sure.
So, I think that's it. Any other?
Chapter 91? Do we have to go to chapter 91?
Yeah, so, Chapter 91, are you familiar with Chapter 91? The
Yeah.
State Waterways Licensing Agency? They will require a permit on their end. It'd probably be a very simple process, because it's a seasonal dock. But they always require that you do the permitting on the local level like you're doing tonight. It could be an RDA or notice of intent. So once you get the RDA issued, either you or the future homeowner have to take that to Chapter 91 and go through their permitting process, and then the dock will really.
The
be
new
in full
homeowner is ready
compliance.
to do that.
What's that?
The new homeowner is already ready to do
Oh,
that.
perfect.
Great.
Okay. Yeah, as long
Just
as
wants
they're
to make
aware.
sure we get this one done, and
Right,
then he'll take over from there.
exactly. Yeah, perfect. Okay. No other comments?
Questions from the commissioners? And was there any follow-up with the new homeowner to ensure that the styrofoam has been encapsulated?
We can, so is this sale of the home already like a done deal or forthcoming? It's going to happen? You know who the new buyer is? We're only asking so we can
Yes,
have
it's
this
a-
information
it's-
provided to
it's-
them?
It's a done deal.
Okay. So we can get their contact information so they're aware of what was discussed
Yes, you
tonight?
can.
Okay,
Yes.
Perfect.
Well, in that case,
And what you'd
congratulations.
like to have done.
Yes, exactly.
All right, if there's no other questions from the commissioners, I see Alex has a hand up. Oh,
Yeah, I have a question. And I'm hoping maybe Drew can just answer this quickly, but it doesn't, the dock is not on their property. So how do we approve a dock and a ramp that isn't from their property? Did you hear that?
Yes.
Okay.
Looks like there's a travel way.
that-
Sorry, go
No,
ahead.
that's not their lot line. That's an old map. If you look at, from what I've looked at on our GIS, and I know our GIS is not perfect, but from what I've seen, their lot line does not cross across that road. On the other side of that, that is owned by, it's not them. It's like the layout for the neighborhood.
Do you have any comments on that? I'm not really,
There's a battle going on with that in land court, because back when the original deeds were done,
right. Right.
They were all supposed to be extended to the lake, and we have a letter that shows that
Okay.
from the head land surveyor in land court. They were supposed to be done.
Right.
They didn't get extended. There again, another problem with the courts.
Right.
That road has already been eliminated by the town of Mashpee on the town's map. And they're charging us for waterfront property. So where we go with
But
that?
you're,
And the fact it's been existing for over 50 years, that dock,
Right.
where it is. Not that particular dock, but a dock.
Right. So there's no other forthcoming deliberations over this? It's a just.
I don't know if the new homeowner is going to go to court and try to get that road eliminated. I know it has been done now. In the last 3 years, 2 people have gotten the road eliminated from their property. The property north of me from Crow Road eliminated all the way down the whole section. And the courts did that, and so theirs all do go down as the letter stated should have been done. So,
but that road along the lake, other properties within that neighborhood have easements across it to access the pond. So I don't know, I mean, just from my familiarity, I used to live in that neighborhood. They, as far as what I can tell from the plot plans, right now, they don't own the waterfront. They have a waterfront view, certainly, but they're not paying taxes on, it's only like the square footage of their lot. It's not, it doesn't extend to the pond.
we are paying waterfront property taxes. Look up the tax bill and you can see that it's waterfront property tax bill.
We went to land court, and I have some letters from land court. I thought I brought them with me, but I don't. We did go to land court on this, and the land court did say that the people behind us that had rights to their beaches, which the beaches are at the end of Crow Road and the end of Metacom, where we're in between those two, they had the right to cross that road, but they didn't have the right to transverse down it. So they had no right to the other beaches in the area. And I do have that from a court proceedings. I thought I brought it with me, but I didn't. But I do have that when we went to land court. And I can bring
Okay.
Drew copies of it so that he has it and it shows it on there.
Sure.
We also have a letter, and I thought it was in here, from a gentleman way back when that says whenever these properties turn over, that road should be eliminated. And it was from land court. So I will also bring that forward to you so that you have it. Since that has happened, nobody transversed down that road at all anymore. And the road is actually, when you put the property lines on there, is on the sand. So you're not going to want people driving down the sand. I don't think conservation would want that.
When I bought the property, I had it all surveyed and found that that road was 8 feet up on my own personal property.
What has happened is the trees have grown up, and people, instead of driving down that road, because the trees are there now, they're coming up and driving on our property by 8 feet. And that's why we went to land court and shut it off. Because at one point, when we first bought the house, I almost got hit by somebody doing 45 miles an hour down that road. And that's when we went to court and said, this is crazy. You're driving up on our land, and we did go to land court, and I do have the paperwork for that. So I will bring it to your attention, probably tomorrow. Okay?
Other questions from the
But just about
commissioners?
every single property on that road has their own dock, whether there's a land in front of them or not, but every single property has
Every single one.
a dock.
Paul Jacobson next to us.
The number we had was 22-43. Now, the 43 stood for John's Pond. And the 22 stood for how many docks or what dock it was. It was the 22nd dock.
Yeah,
My neighbor
43
has
is,
the 23rd, my other one has the 21, and so on.
Yeah, 43 is the number DEP, Department of Environmental Protection,
Yeah.
assigns for the town of Mashpee.
Right,
22 is the permit number.
right.
All right, other questions from the commissioners? Questions from the audience? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I would move for negative, in regards to the application of Dale L. Doherty at 192 Ninigret Ave, move for a negative determination in regards to the application.
Thank you. If there's no discussion, we'll hear a second.
Second.
Thank you, Brian. Now voting, roll call. Brian?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Charlie?
Yes.
Alex?
No.
I vote aye, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Trying to get as much sleep as I can, yeah.
Next one continues, so you can call it already.
Thank you.
Pass out the thing, yeah.
Now calling the 6:03 hearing, Flat Pond Homeowners Association at 3 Greatfield Landing, New Seabury Dunes Golf Course. Proposed treatment and eradication of aquatic invasive species. Representative is Solitude Lake Management. This has been requested to be continued.
And the continuance request date is for January 6th, 2022, at 6:12 PM.
Thank you, Drew. Do I hear a motion for continuance?
I would move in regards to the application of Flat Pond Homeowners Association at 3 Greatfield Landing in Seabury to continue at their request to January 6th, 2022.
Thank you, Brad. If there's no discussion, I'll hear a second.
Second.
Thank you, Charlie. Voting, Brian,
Yes.
Tom,
Aye.
Brad,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Charlie,
Yes.
Alex.
Yes.
I vote aye as well, motion carries. Now calling the 6:06 hearing, 23 Ocean Bluff LLC, 23 Ocean Bluff Drive. Proposed installation of a pool with associated hardscaping and mitigation plantings. Representative is Sudbury Design Group. This is continued from 11/18, and this is an NOI.
Good evening, thank you. My name is Mike Kutu. I'm with Sudbury Design Group. We're the landscape architects on the project. The proposed project is located on 23 Ocean Bluff. It is impacted by 2 coastal banks to the north, a coastal bank to the north, and also a coastal bank to the south, which is where the proximity of our work is taking place. There's a coastal bank, coastal dune down to the beach. The project is we are proposing the construction of a small swimming pool. It's approximately 15 by 26 and associated hardscaping around the pool for functional sitting space. There's a small fire pit area as part of that terrace and a little outdoor grill station. All of the paving would be set on a gravel base. There's an increase in impervious, obviously. There's currently a small terrace, and then the lawn currently goes out to the edge of the coastal bank, approximately right to the edge of the bank. Our calculations came up with a required mitigation based on the increase in impervious, and your formula to required of 4,320 square feet. We're proposing 4,452 square feet. And what we're looking to do primarily, the coastal bank here is in very good condition. It's a fairly robust, stable bank. And so looking at mitigation opportunities, the dune has some zones that are somewhat bare in spots, and so what we are proposing is the planting of approximately 3,000 beach grass down in the dune to further enhance the dune. There's areas that are completely just sand. There's other areas where the grass is not doing well, and the proposal for mitigation is to really do a nice vegetative planting of beach grass down in that area. We do have some opportunities as well within the bank or right at the top of the bank in between our proposed construction to do some additional mitigation planting. And again, we're eliminating all of the lawn area currently in the back of the house. As part of the project, all of the impervious areas will be, we will capture all of the runoff with subsurface drainage. So none of the impervious areas will pitch towards the bank. They will all slope towards a internal drains and a infiltration system. Construction is very difficult in this neighborhood. We've done 3 pool projects in this neighborhood of similar character. The houses are very close together. The pool construction will take place with the absolute smallest pieces of equipment we can get in there. It's a really limited access, so we can only get small equipment back there. A good part of it will be hand done and wheelbarrows, and there will be a very small mini excavator. So the equipment and the impact of construction will be very minimal. There's one substantial oak on the property, just on the east side of the coastal bank there, which we will go out of our way to protect. It's a fairly nice oak tree. And we would have an arborist during excavation on site to assess and to complete any root pruning that we feel is necessary if we encounter any roots at all. The pool is relatively shallow. It's not your traditional 8-foot deep pool. It's a relatively shallow pool. And the end towards the bank where you see that sort of wide gap is a auto cover. So what the auto cover has allowed us to do, unlike the other projects that we've done in this neighborhood, is we've talked to the building department, and it will eliminate the need for any fencing, which is really nice because we, on other projects, have meandered the fence through the coastal bank in a manner that was not very visible, but we won't have to do that at all. So the auto cover that we're putting on that end of the pool will eliminate the need for any fencing at the top of the bank or anything that would inhibit any kind of wildlife migration. Stormwater. We have requested a waiver, and we feel as though we've met the criteria for the waiver. The largest, the most compelling one is probably how compelling is this to build a swimming pool? And I know that's always a question. The client who purchased this property, I guess a year ago or so, has had 10 to 12 orthopedic surgeries. He's a former athlete and really needs to swim. They also have a son who cannot go in public pools, so they really feel as though this is something they need, to have at this home. Other than that, I think we meet the criteria for all the other requirements of the waiver. And take any questions you might have.
Thank you. Drew, comments?
So one of the aspects of this, yes, it is, as you can see, the pool and patio hardscaping is going right up to the proposed to go right up to the top of the coastal bank, and does request a removal of a pitch pine or a black pine tree that you can see in the dash circle with the abbreviation TBR, to be removed. Does everybody see that on the plan? Okay. So this was brought up in initial discussion and review of the proposal as something they wish to remove to accommodate the pool, and there was a potential concern about the safety of the tree regardless of the installation of the pool.
Yes.
They did do an assessment done by Bartlett Tree Company, certified arborist, submitted an assessment as part of this information packet. In the assessment, there are different levels of assessments that a certified arborist can go through. I think they went through levels 1 and 2, which aren't particularly in-depth, but enough to properly assess any risk associated with a given tree species. The outcome of the assessment rated the tree as a moderate risk, which is kind of middle of the road. I mean, from my experience, and I'm going through arborist training currently, a moderate risk does not justify removal. So I just wanted to bring that out because that was mentioned that there was a possibility the tree was hazardous, which would lend more weight to its removal for the proposed pool. But I don't consider a moderate risk assessment to be necessitating removal or concern for removal. So in light of that, what I would ask or propose is to look at a different configuration of the proposed pool, to draw it back from the top of the coastal bank, because right now, as you can see, and I understand mitigation is being proposed in accordance with the waiver standards. I think there might be an opportunity, though, to shift and reorient and create a little bit more of a buffer between the top of the coastal bank and the edge of pool, and maybe even not even have to take that tree out. So I just put that out there for consideration of the applicant. Let's see other comments.
Drew, could I respond to that?
Sure.
We did look at alternative layouts for the pool. And also had a discussion with Bartlett specifically about those alternatives. And the disruption of, even if we turned the pool, a couple of things, they have young children, so they need some space between the house and the pool, just from a functional standpoint. And the proximity of the excavation to that pine probably would not have had a good impact on the longevity of that tree, which again, as a moderate risk, I think we would have further put that tree at further risk. And so it was their recommendation that that's probably not a good way to go, because it was going to increase the risk of that tree being problematic and a safety issue.
Okay. Was
So
there
we
any
did
consideration?
look at other layouts,
Yeah.
to your point,
Yeah.
as an alternative, and felt that it just, with that pine there, it just wasn't feasible.
Was there any consideration to eliminating the fire pit and other hardscaping to accommodate the pool? Because it seems that's the most coveted request in this permit.
Yeah, but it's still, proximity to the pine didn't change, no matter how we slid the pool horizontally or parallel with the house.
Reducing footprint? Reducing the
The
footprint?
pool, in order for him to have a therapeutic pool of any nature, it's already a very small, it's only 15 by 26. It's very, very small. So there's a certain size that, I mean, in order to do any swimming at all, we needed a certain size. So that was kind of dictating things.
What if it was moved to the north and any of the other additional hardscaping was moved to the south of the property?
We felt that oak was more, moving it that way, we felt would have more
The
impact
oak,
on the
yep,
oak.
okay.
And we felt the oak was a more significant tree.
Sure.
That had better longevity likelihood. So again, we consulted with Bartlett about both of those trees because we feel they're critical. One thing we'd be happy to do is to plant an additional tree on the bank, or, you know, or donate to a tree planting the commission is doing off-site to mitigate for that tree coming down. But being at moderate risk, we just don't see it surviving this kind of construction.
Can you tell me a little bit about the cedar tree that's in the same predicament that's next to the fire pit? The health of that tree? Or Drew, if you observed it?
Appear to have any health issues. That wasn't addressed in the Bartlett assessment. It was just the.
That was a planted cedar. That's not a native cedar. That was a planted tree as part of the landscape. So, so that's proposed to be removed.
Did you have other notes to go over, Drew?
I have one.
Oh, yeah.
Sure. I didn't see it called out on the plan what was to be planted in between all the hardscaping, all of the pool, the fire pit, the grill. Were you expecting to replace, to reinstall the lawn in that
Lawn?
area?
No, there's no lawn going in at all.
So the whole back is going to be hardscaped?
Paved right to the house. There's no planting, so there's no planting against the house.
Oh, okay, so it's proposed to be completely,
Yeah, it's so tight that they need space to move, so
Sure.
planting beds. So all the planting really is to the south end of the proposed.
okay.
Yep.
One of the other comments I had is not specific to the proposed project itself, and I did ask Mike Picard this, is that the notice of intent doesn't contain any contact information for the current owners of this property.
Okay, we did,
Absolutely required.
we did give a, information, it's in a trust, and we gave all the trust information. Is that,
No contact, how did you,
there's a phone number that we gave.
it's not in the notice? Or is it in the
I
notice?
thought Mike talked to you, Caitlin, and gave you the number. We can get that for you. I will say this is privacy is an issue. This is a high-profile client. It's not a big deal, but we can get that for you.
You have to communicate, we have to have the ability to communicate with
Yeah.
people who are issuing permits
My
to.
understanding was, because I gave Mike the phone number, and I thought he got it to Caitlin. I can get you that. I can give it to you right now if you
Yeah,
like.
I don't
Or after the
Yeah,
meeting.
we don't have it.
Yeah.
Email would be very helpful too, because there's
I
a lot
have
of
both.
document exchange.
I
so.
have both I can pass on to you, Drew.
The other issue, the other item we brought up with Mike was to check with Cape and Islands, whom's delineation you used for Coastal Bank and Coastal Dune
Yep.
in this area that is subject to
So the plans that we use.
impacts from storm. The delineation was from 2017. I'm not saying that I have any doubts that it's still accurate, but we do request, if you didn't do the delineation, did you speak to Cape and Islands to ensure that that delineation is still
We've
accurate?
been trying to talk to them this week and have been unable to make a connection, even as early as
That's
recently
pretty
as
important
today.
information to have validated before the commission makes a decision, in
Yep.
my opinion. So I think we'll need to see that, or I would recommend getting that information before any decision is rendered.
So you just need confirmation that the delineations haven't changed, essentially.
Yep. They probably haven't, but 2017, we look at 4+ years, it's a possibility.
Yeah, we're a few months past the limit.
Yep.
And I thought you and I had discussed that early on, and you thought that wasn't going to be an issue.
I think an issue, we still need to validate it.
Okay.
Yeah. So and I included in my comments that, it's very important, and you did touch on this as far as if the project were approved, there would be on-site monitoring to ensure root zones were not impacted.
Yes.
But was anything done prior to to try and assess that? I mean, I know there are methods to try and assess impacts to root zones.
Yeah, and-
that can happen
and-
before the project takes place.
Sure, and part of that impacted our decisions on how the pool was going to be built and where it would sit, and
Okay.
the decision on the pine and the protection of that oak specifically.
I don't think I have anything else.
Just a point of clarification, so the hardscaping that's planned in between the pool and the fire pit, and the grill is,
That's all terrace area.
what's that?
That's all terrace
Terrace, okay.
patio.
Would there be a way to make that semi-pervious?
Well, it's all set on gravel base with polymeric sand joints.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's all
So-
set on gravel.
Sure, okay, thank you, I think you did mention that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Questions from the commissioners? Questions from our cyberspace commissioners?
I do have a question. I wondered why this pool couldn't be rotated and made more horizontal.
Well, that's kind of what Drew was asking, the same thing, and we looked at that. And again, it would have put us as pretty much in the same place in terms of how close we got to the bank. And we wouldn't have been able to get the length that we even got. So we felt from an impact standpoint, it didn't really change much. Looking at it, we looked at options, we looked at alternatives with the owner.
The dotted lines are the setback from the property lines,
Correct.
but I don't see why you can have a narrower and longer pool by rotating it and moving the fire pit.
That would place the pool between or place the larger mitigation area between the pool and the coastal bank. That could be done.
And extend the mitigation along the
Right.
coastal bank.
Yeah. Understanding it would still require the removal of the pine, but at least you'd be pulling the pool and structure away from the top of the bank. That's a concern, even with the limited excavation. It's a concern, and when you factor in the loss of the tree and the roots that are currently helping to stabilize that area at the top of the bank, that amplifies that concern even more, which I think justifies looking at this again and pulling that structure back, because it looks like it's feasible, and I think it would make maybe not a huge difference, but it would make a difference, especially in terms of where you can propose.
Where we are
mitigation.
relative to the coastal bank.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, my only concern is going to be how it impacts, I don't want to get any closer to that oak. That's what we're really trying to avoid by keeping it in that direction.
Okay.
I guess I have one question. I'm struggling here with so much of the mitigation. I mean, yes, 4,000 square feet sounds excellent, but when so much of it is in a coastal dune structure that's already functioning, so you're just enhancing it. I mean, if we were to just leave the dune alone, would it be better off than going in and adding to it?
Well, I know we've done similar on this road, we've done similar enhancement of the dunes, and it's been pretty successful.
Okay. Is he speaking into the microphone? Sorry.
She had trouble.
Yeah,
hearing.
I said that we've done similar projects along Ocean Bluff where we did do dune enhancement, and it's been pretty successful.
That's all hand tool work on the dune?
Oh, yeah, that's plugs. It's basically plugs.
A lot of those homes have not changed. That whole, dunes area was done probably as many as 15 years ago. And what you see is probably what is the result of 15 years that those houses have been there. A minimum of 15, some of them are 20. So what's there is probably what was originally planted to offset the invasion in the area. And I don't know that they've ever come back and asked for the ability to go in there and enhance it again. So I think it's probably going to stay the way it is unless it's hit.
I would assume so. I
taken
mean,
some
it looks
pretty
like it
direct
hasn't
hits.
really, taken a hit, so to speak, from any of the coastal storms. So it seems to be, well, it is, for all intents and purposes, a pretty stable system.
Sure is.
But my biggest concern is really, trying to avoid alteration that close to the bank. I just think it's too close. I think that could be something else that could be looked at in terms of an overall configuration reorientation. Maybe have Bartlett look at that oak tree with a reorientation, have that examined, and see if something else can be accommodated to shift this away from the coastal bank. And then you can accommodate some mitigation where it's probably most needed, which is really
Between the
where
pool and the bank.
that end of the pool is currently proposed. That's my recommendation, in addition to validating the delineations.
I would agree. I think, I'm certainly not a landscape architect, but I've seen a lot of very beautiful work done to this nature with different shaped pools. So if, I would personally also like to see a redesign that we could, I hear your point about getting close to the white oak, but the pool where it is already is within that radius delineated around the oak, so I would like to see something done differently.
An alternative plan.
I think we also need to hear directly from medical personnel or at least the owner to describe what's the minimum length of pool in order to get the benefit that they want, that the gentleman wants. I think we need to at least consider that, get some medical opinion however that comes, whoever it comes from, so that he's getting the proper exercise.
That's a good point, Brian.
So just for procedural purposes, rather than voting no or, voting it down, would the applicant be willing to continue?
To the next available hearing, and we'll have something turned around
Okay.
for that date.
Thank you for that, Brian.
I'll give you the date and time in a second.
If it's January 6th at 6:15.
What is it, Caitlin? I'm sorry.
Sorry, it's January 6th at 6:15.
Okay, so we are also going before the ZBA because we've got a structure within 50 feet, so we have to go to the ZBA. We're scheduled with them, I believe, that week. Can it run concurrently, or we have to get our plans in sync and approved by, we want to make sure we are satisfying your concerns.
Sure.
Right.
How do you suggest we handle that?
What date's the ZBA meeting? Is it the 8th?
I think so. It's their first one in January.
Okay. Their decision may be contingent on what we say. I don't know how they want
It sounded more
to-
like a formality
yeah.
than anything else, if it got
yeah.
your stamp of approval, so. Okay, so January 6th, at what time, I'm sorry?
6:15.
6:15, okay. Okay. All right,
If there's no further discussion, entertain a motion from the commissioners.
I would consider a move on the property at 23 Ocean Bluff LLC, 23 Ocean Bluff Drive, to continue their application to January 6th at 6:15.
Thank you. If there's no discussion, here a second.
Second.
Thank you, Brian.
great.
Oh, did you have the certified mail receipts?
Let me see if I have them with me in my car. If
Okay,
I don't, I'll
sure.
get them to you probably tomorrow.
Okay, that's
Okay.
fine.
Drop 'em off.
You can
I do
email
have
them
'em all,
scans of them or.
Yeah,
okay.
that's fine.
All right. Voting, Brian,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Brad,
Yes?
Paul,
Yes.
Charlie,
Yes.
Alex.
Yes.
I vote aye as well. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and I'll just quickly read into record the Board of Health comments where property is tied into new Seabury wastewater treatment plant. Not really applicable.
Only being here, still can't hold a plan.
Out of practice.
Do I not have to get up?
For too long.
What's that?
Take it easy. Thank you. Now calling to order the 6:09 hearing for BEC MA Properties, LLC, 42 Spoondrift Way. Proposed demolition and reconstruction of single-family home, hardscape landscape modifications, septic system upgrade, and mitigation plantings. Representative is Crawford Land Management. This is an NOI.
Good evening. For the record, Jen Crawford from Crawford Land Management, here on behalf of the applicant. David Martin from DH Martin Engineering is also with me tonight as the engineer on record. So in terms of this project, the pertinent resource areas on the property are a non-eroding coastal bank with a bulkhead at the toe, as well as land subject to coastal storm flowage, which is in the form of an AE flood zone. The existing house on the property is a walkout, and the walkout portion of the house is within the existing flood zone. There is very little naturalized area on the property, and what is naturalized on the property is fairly sparsely vegetated with relatively few native species in the understory. Most of the property is either comprised of the house or of landscape features or fairly large mulch beds with scattered landscape plantings within them. The proposal in front of you is to raise and rebuild the house in a similar footprint as to what is there. The biggest difference is that we are proposing an attached garage. The garage location, as shown on the plan, is basically within an area that is a mulch bed at the moment. The deck There is an existing deck and patio on the water side of the house, and that use of the property remains the same with the proposed. It takes a different form, but still a deck and a patio underneath on the water side of the building. In order to remove the existing dwelling and to get the new dwelling out of the flood zone, some regrading on the site is required, as shown on the plans. Using the mitigation table in your regulations, we calculated that with the differences in impervious areas. The mitigation requirement for the project is roughly 3,720 square feet. We are proposing that basically the entire waterside area of the property, as well as along the sides of the building, be transitioned into native plant communities as our mitigation, and that is equivalent to a little over 5,000 square feet, so it more than meets the mitigation requirement. That mitigation we're proposing is taking the form of both native ground covers as well as understory shrubs and a passel of native trees going in. There are a few trees that do need to be removed within the limit of work due to the grading that needs to happen in order to get the new dwelling out of the flood zone and demolish the existing. What else can I tell you? I did ask Drew for any comments that he had prior to the hearing so that I could attempt to be as prepared as possible to address them. One of the comments that he had is that the proposed site plan on record that was submitted to you did not have the buffer zones on them, so David was actually able to add those to his plan, so I do have two full-size copies, of that proposed site plan with the associated buffer zones. One of the other things that Drew had asked specifically about was a large oak tree near the 100-foot buffer, and the reason for it being shown as removed on our proposal, which it's actually shown differently on the survey plan than on our plan. He was absolutely right to question that. The reason it was marked on our plan for removal is just because it's generally within the limits of grading, but it's right on the edge of it, and that was an oversight on my part, to be honest. So after looking at it again, he was right to ask that question. It would not be necessary to remove that tree in order to accommodate the project. So that's a revision that we'd be happy to make. The other comments that he had was about a float that was pulled up on the coastal bank during a previous site visit, so that can be removed from the coastal bank. I don't foresee that as being any sort of an issue. And that was, I think, pretty much it as far as his comments that I could be helpful on. So, yeah, with that, there's a lot of detail on the plans and in the narratives, so I'm happy to walk through any of it in further detail or answer any questions you have about the project.
Thank you. Drew, comments?
Just to show some photos of the site. Top left here is looking at the existing home from the road. You see most of the lot is in a previously altered state, legally altered condition. Top right, looking around on the seaward side of the home, the existing deck patio going down to another deck before you hit the fixed pier. Bottom left, I think that's the oak that I was referring to there.
Yes.
Looks like it, yeah. So, so we'll make note of that, and maybe just a revised plan just to remove it as being called for removal. Just remove that designation on a revised plan.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And actually, one thing that I should have noted, since you're pulling these photos up, is that even though we are maintaining a similar use as to what's there with the deck above and the patios below, the proposed project does move those features further landward than as they currently exist, so.
So just some other photos just to show you the all-around condition of the lot. You do have some scattered natural vegetation on the coastal bank here. Same thing on the other side. There are a lot of, if you read the project description, it's a mix of native, and there's quite a few invasives as well, which are part of the overall mitigation proposal for the project. The house was established in the 60s, so it predates. It's a pre-existing non-conforming structure. It's not unusual in New Seabury. That's why you have a house that's already occurring over a coastal bank. See, proposal involves site regrading to get the home out of the 100-year floodplain. Proposed home and hardscaping necessitate removal of, I think it's 9 total trees, maybe 8 without the oak. I think that's what it said in the narrative, but,
I think it said that, like, for the water side, and I think we quantified
water side,
yeah, to try and kind of break it up a little bit, because we are proposing to remove a number of Leland cypress along the side property, but they're shown on the plan, but they're a non-native species, so we are
Right.
trying to replace that function with eastern red cedar on that side of the property. But I think the land management plan did walk through all the
yeah.
proposals.
Yep.
Yep.
So, the proposal calls for a significant restoration of the vegetated areas on the lot with native material and a proposal for a 3-year monitoring period of all mitigated areas. Temporary impacts of the coastal bank in the interest of improving overall conditions on the bank in terms of habitat, species diversity, and stability. So I think they're doing a really great proposal in terms of trying to turn around a situation where you've got very limited natural vegetated areas and compromised with a lot of invasives into something that will make it a lot more robust in terms of habitat and species diversity. The coastal bank, function of the coastal bank is a vertical buffer to storm damage. It is a non-eroding coastal bank, so it is not a sediment source bank. And the proposed mitigation and monitoring thereof, in my opinion, will greatly enhance the stability of the bank and its function as a vertical buffer to storm damage. So with the understanding that we have the revised plan for the 50 and 100-foot buffers to be shown on the surveyed plan. They are shown on the landscape plan, but they just weren't put on the survey plan, not a big deal. And it's already been taken care of. Clarification on the 16-inch oak.
Awesome, thank you.
So I recommend a close an issue, but I do suggest that there be a condition of weekly monitoring reports if the commission approves the project during the construction period, just due to the proximity of the bank and the sensitivity of the area overall. And of course, submission of a documented signed 3-year monitoring and maintenance contract for the mitigation. And no other comments unless, Kate, you have something to add?
No, I,
I think she did address the float too, that would be removed.
would there be an adequate storage for the float on the property at all?
I actually don't know the answer to that. I'm sure that we can find a place that's not on the coastal bank in order to store it, but I actually am not involved with how that operates. Do either of you have a good answer for that? Other than I'm sure we can find a place?
What was the question again, I'm sorry?
Oh, it was just regarding the float storage on the property. I just saw that it was directly on the bank, and typically we
Existing
don't allow
deck
for
is
the
only
resource
place it could
area.
be.
I think so.
Put the float on the deck. Looks
on the
about
deck
the
or
same
was it on the
size.
It was on the bank.
Okay.
The response is, would it be acceptable to store the float on the deck? There's the same dimensions?
As long as it has structural integrity to hold the weight of it. Yeah, as long as it's not, I mean, the point is, it shouldn't be on a naturally vegetated area of coastal bank. So any sort of, yeah, I think that would be. Can we get your name for the record, just because when you speak, we need to document who you.
Martin, the civil engineer for
Okay.
the project.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
So if you would like, we're more than happy to just take a look at the deck and make sure that it's structurally sound in order to do that, and that can be included in the special conditions if you'd like. Does that work for everybody?
Yes,
Good plan?
we understand we will not be storing the float in the resource area.
Correct.
Okay,
I mean, another idea is to get bubblers if it's a concern of leaving it in over the wintertime. We've seen a lot of that for docks and piers in this area. But just to throw it out there as another possibility, rather than going through the effort of hoisting it up on a deck,
Yep.
having bubblers to break up the ice around it in that time of year, so.
There's bubbles all over this area. All that entire creek has bubbles under it, so.
It aerates the water, too.
There you go.
Other questions from the commissioners? Alex and Charlie, anything?
Nothing.
All right. From the audience, any questions, concerns? Hearing none, we'll entertain a motion if there is no more discussion.
for discussion.
Oh, I
Ruth?
did have, sorry, just had a couple of comments to read into record.
I
Excuse
apologize,
me.
Taylor.
The 42 Spoondrift Way for building required approval from ZBA. And Board of Health comments that the property is in a Zone 2 and is restricted to existing 3 bedrooms with a conventional system. No design plans have been submitted to the Board of Health for approval. Floor plan to be reviewed upon submission to the building department. Require floor plan for primary dwelling to verify existing bedroom count. Rodent inspection and asbestos inspection are required to meet Board of Health demo permit requirements.
Thank you.
Chair, just to continue the discussion, I heard that the only thing that I think I heard was the monitoring program for 3 years. Is there any other conditions?
Weekly during construction.
Yeah, monitoring, weekly monitoring reports to be submitted during the construction phase.
Hey, Drew, could you clarify that a little bit in terms of, because I mean, construction phase could be 2 years. Like, in terms of like, when would you like to, like, at the beginning when it's raised, when there's any grading work done?
Yeah,
Like
grading
basically-
work,
Okay,
the type of work that's gonna cause the most alteration,
okay,
yeah. And then just, an emphasis on making sure, if it is going to span over an extended period of time, that, the monitoring of that erosion control be of the utmost
okay.
importance.
So that would be included in those weekly reports?
Yeah.
Perfect, okay.
Yeah.
Just to have a little bit of,
Yeah,
just so I have a little
Right,
bit of
yeah,
guidance. Thank you.
understood.
Appreciate it.
sure.
There's no,
I would move for a close and issue in regards to the application BECMA Properties LLC at 42 Spoondrift Way. The following condition that there be a monitoring program for 3 years to make sure that the plantings are solid, and a weekly report during the construction period as well.
there's no more discussion. We'll hear a second.
Second.
Thank you, Brian. Voting, Brian,
Yes.
Tom,
Aye.
Brad,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Charlie,
Yes.
Alex.
Yes.
I vote aye as well. Motion carries.
Thank you very much. And
Thank you.
Drew will get you a revised plan tomorrow, probably.
Okay.
There's 2 copies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I had to, it was making
Dad
fun of my
could carry
chart
that paper.
folding skills.
Why don't you carry the paper for the lady?
I guess I gotta work on my chivalry, Brad. Now calling to order the 6:12 hearing for David and Ann Titlebaum, trustees Waterway 38 Realty Trust, 38 Waterway, proposed septic system upgrade. Representative is Cape and Islands Engineering. This is an RDA.
Good evening. For the record, Raul Lizardi from Cape and Islands Engineering, representing the applicant and the current homeowners of the property. The property is requiring a septic upgrade as part of the property transfer to a new homeowner. So part of the transfer of the property is for the septic system design to be approved through Board of Health and Conservation Commission. The project was already presented through Board of Health for the several variances in terms of Title V and the local Board of Health regulation. But this is the first time we're presenting it before this commission. The resources on or within 100 feet of this property are a channel which is associated with the creek at Papaneset Bay. There's a salt marsh along the shores of the channel. And this house was built at a time when they were building the houses along the coastal bank to all of these water bodies. So we have a coastal bank that comes through the north, it hits the house, and then it comes out of the south of the house and it hits the neighboring house. So it's nestled in the coastal bank. The grades in the front yard are roughly from elevation 15 and 14. The grades in the backyard are roughly 8 and 6. So that 8-foot drop is what constitutes the coastal bank. Now, the DEP coastal bank happens to stop at the elevation of the flood zone. However, the local Mashpee coastal bank, because the slopes continue to be greater than 25%, but, I'm sorry, greater than 10% but less than 25%, it extends the foot higher. So in this case, the DEP coastal bank is elevation 11, the local coastal bank is elevation 12. The septic system that's failed is completely located in the backyard. There is a septic tank in the backyard, and there's a leaching field in the backyard. The leaching field was deemed in failure because it does not provide 4-foot separation to the groundwater. And that's the reason why a new septic system has to be proposed. There is plumbing exiting the house, both in the front of the house and the back of the house. The back of the house being the lowest of the plumbing, what we're proposing to do is remove the existing septic tank, which is found to be already sort of deteriorated. So we're replacing the existing concrete tank with a new Title V concrete tank. We're proposing a lift station in the form of a manhole with a pump chamber to get the flow back up to the front yard. The front yard is the furthest we can get from the resources. The leaching field existing is 50 feet from the salt marsh, and the new leaching field is going to be 127 feet from the salt marsh. Although the existing leaching field provides greater separation to the coastal bank, it's kind of a reverse setback because the closest point of this leaching field is to the toe of the coastal bank. The new septic system out in the front yard is going to be 14 feet to the coastal bank, but it is the best location for this particular septic system upgrade. The only access to the backyard to do the installation will be along the north side of the property, and there's 3 trees on the north side, northwest corner of the property from the existing driveway to get down to the backyard to be able to install the components that have to be installed on the backyard of the property. There's a limit of work that we're carrying, sort of following the existing edge of clearing and following the footprint of the old leaching field. Not for the reason of excavating the old leaching field, but because we need move to operate for the installation of the septic tank and pump chamber on the backyard. Then the limit of work wraps back towards the direction of the existing deck. There is no proposed increase in bedrooms, so no proposed increase in flow, because this is in a zone 2, and we are we're not allowed to increase more than 3 bedrooms, and that's what we're proposing to do. Last week, I believe it was last week, Board of Health approved and issued the local upgrade approvals, and now we're before this board to get approval of this RDA. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you. Drew, comments?
I was just curious if there was a plan after the trees were removed for replanting the area.
There's not a plan at the moment. If the board likes to condition this RDA with a couple of more trees after construction is done towards the street side, because we don't want to plant anything where there's a gravity sewer line coming along the front of the house towards the backyard, nor within the force main. Because one of the things that was found during the inspection is that the existing pipe had some root introduced into the pipe that was plugging the pipes.
Oh.
So we don't want anything close to these 2 pipes to hurt what we're trying to improve.
Sure.
But if the commission, I know that there's some RDAs that we can add some conditions. If there's a condition that a couple of trees could be tucked to the northwest corner away from the improvements that we're doing for the septic.
What about out by the resource area?
In the backyard, there's a large 24-inch oak close to the leaching field. That's probably one of the culprits of some of the damages that is happening. So we don't want anything on that side. I believe there's the opportunity, if you see the edge of clearing towards the water,
Yep.
towards Salt Marsh 1, flag number 1,
Yes.
there's like an opening. It's not a cross-through between properties, it's just that there's an opening. That could be a candidate for something. Elevation-wise, it is roughly elevation 3s, so it's very close to groundwater. I don't know what would be recommended in that location, if that's the preferred location, but that will be definitely away from the system, which will be preferred for not affecting the septic. I just don't know
Look at
what the
some,
recommendation is.
Fact wet shrubbery or something like that.
Yeah, if it's some
that
type
would
of shrubbery,
tolerate, wet soil conditions. It would have to be tree for tree, but something just to help to enhance that buffer. I think it would do the most good if we were to do compensatory planting was to be put in, something along that variety. That would be a good thing to have to compensate for the loss of the trees.
I think that's a fair trade-off for those trees, shrubs on the backyard on that low area.
Yeah.
Would you propose, this cedars at this point, or?
Well, cedars will become trees. I don't know if
Yeah.
that close to the groundwater, I don't know about trees, but
Yeah.
it's
We
it's
could take a
fairly
look at,
shallow.
it might even be something where we could look at maybe even high tide bush or something like that, groundsel tree, groundsel bush. That way, not looking at any potential root systems to impact or undermine what's being proposed. But,
Also, our lawn standards, we would want to be adhered to when they reseed the area after the septic work's done in the
yeah,
back.
any reestablished lawn would have to meet, as long as we're in
Meet the
jurisdiction,
requirements.
meet the requirements, so we can put that in as a condition as well. Overall, I mean, it's an upgrade from the existing failed septic system, so it's just for the access to lose trees, it'd be good to get some compensatory measures for that.
And I know it's not in our jurisdiction, but the issue will be, and it'll be talked about at some point in time, you put cedar trees in that location, you're gonna block the view of the next two homes. I know we don't care about views, but we ought to be considered,
Yeah.
at least. So, when
Just
placing a
looking at
tree.
enhancing the buffer, whether it's shrubs or trees.
Yeah, well,
and that's
shrubs
just
are great, but,
yeah.
Hey, can you pull up the pictures of the property
Yeah.
for a second?
It was a picture of the front of the property. Oh,
I didn't get a great picture of the back, but.
Yeah, it's kind of like here. I mean, yeah, it's lawn going pretty close up to
Yep.
to the bank, so just to get something in this area, up in here, I think was the side that you were talking about, Raul,
Yep.
would be good just to create some more of a buffer there. And we can work with you on the selected species.
And those are the trees slated for removal?
Yeah, yeah.
Those are the trees. I don't know the condition of them. They're pretty infested with an ivy. I
Right.
think it's
English
not
ivy.
English ivy. I think it's Irish ivy.
Yep.
Has just taken over it on one of them. And it also depends on the equipment they actually choose to go to the backyard. If they use smaller equipment, they could probably just get rid of just 2 instead of 3.
Sure.
But because these are precast structures, I need the precast for buoyancy. If they don't do precast and they do something lighter,
Yeah.
they will have to use a slab just to counter the buoyancy.
Yeah.
If it is the precast, I believe all 3 will have to take down.
Okay. Okay.
Other questions?
I just look at a whole lot of work being done, nothing being done to the home itself. This will be back in front of us as soon as they are able to tear it down and
sure.
rebuild. That's not our problem. Not our problem. It's the last house along there that has not been torn down or
Right.
rebuilt.
Falling like dominoes.
Just more fees.
There's no other questions from the commission, and I'm guessing none from the audience. We'll entertain a motion. Well, there are proposed conditions for this RDA from the conservation agent regarding the mitigation of tree removal.
I was too busy looking at other stuff, I didn't take notes. So what are some of the conditions that we need to include, Drew? I'm
So
sorry.
I would just word it as that a condition for mitigation in the event of tree removals of the 3 trees, or the 1, 2, or 3, there's compensatory measures to make up for the loss of trees.
This is an RDA.
It's RDA, it's not common to condition RDA, but the commission is empowered to do so.
Okay. So I would move in regards to the application of David and Ann Titlebaum, trustees, Waterway 38 Realty Trust, 38 Waterway, to a negative determination in regards to this application with one condition that any mitigation should be planned if there is tree removal on the property.
Thank you, Brad. If there's no discussion, here a second.
Second.
Well, that might have been a tie. I'm going to go with Tom just because he's here.
Earn your money.
Right? Voting, Brian,
Yes.
Tom,
Aye.
Brad,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Charlie,
Yes.
Alex.
Yes.
I vote aye as well. Motion carries. Thank you.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you as well.
Oh, and just quickly, the Board of Health just stated that the septic plan was approved on December 2nd.
Thank you, Kate.
You're welcome. Just coming in last.
All right.
We can go to the, we can pass out the, going through 23 Ocean Bluff.
Reaching the end of our hearings,
I
we'll
did
turn
remember
back to the pre-post agenda items.
We already approved the 2022 meeting calendar. Next item up is, commission needs to take a vote on the release of a performance bond for 161 Old Barnstable Road. I'm going to bring up a plan for all you all to see. This is an application, notice of intent, order of conditions issued. This was kind of three consecutive, or was it 3 or 4 consecutive properties that were proposed for development of single-family homes. And this was the one that required, some of you may not have been with the commission when this, I don't recall if everyone was on the commission when this was approved, but this particular lot, 161 Old Barnstable, involved the filling of a portion of an existing wetland. And based on our regulatory requirements, that triggered wetland restoration on a 2-to-1 ratio, I believe it was. Pretty substantial restoration, given the area of wetland that was filled, which was relatively minor. So they had to go through this wetland restoration as per Regulation 20 under Chapter 172. And the restoration was carried out by LEC Environmental consulting firm, good reputation for doing wetland restoration work. And so we had several site visits over the months since the work had begun. And in the opinion of LEC, regulations carry post wetland restoration monitoring and maintenance, and so for at least 3 years. And going through, once the wetland restoration was complete, and you can see it highlighted here on this plan in the green areas, these are all the replication areas that were required. They had established so well, in the opinion of LEC, and I agreed, that there was really no need to extend monitoring and maintenance, and it's your discretion as to whether or not you would want to have that happen. But what the regulation does state is that, if that is the decision, that an as-built be provided, as-built plan of the wetland restoration, and that's what this is. And Cape and Islands had drafted this up. So I did multiple site visits out here to this location to ensure that not only was the wetland restoration done based on regulatory standards, but that it took hold and thrived, and it did. And I really didn't see any rational reason to extend monitoring and maintenance to a wetland restoration area that did indeed thrive after becoming very well established. And it's in an isolated area. It's not subject to any sort of additional impacts as a result of future considerations on this lot. It's surrounded by a 50-foot buffer zone all around that cannot be intruded upon. So it's well protected. So just wanted to provide that to you. Part of this requirement invoked the submittal of a $10,000 performance bond that's been held by the town treasurer. So I contacted the treasurer to see what the procedure is to release that bond, and there is a specific motion, which I've given to the chairman, that he can make. But prior to that, if there's any questions or concerns about the history of this project or anything else related to it.
Do you see any possibility that wetlands are going to be impacted by other this is what, near what is causing this to be wet? Is it the river that's
No, it's
overflows?
not. It's an isolated wetland. But it's close to the water table, and it's kind of like performed as a drainage area for Old Barnstable Road over the years, and I think it kind of like
So it's
took
not
on
the-
more
it's
wetland
not the
conditions.
Quashnet River somehow working their way.
It
into
is
this.
not. No, it's an isolated freshwater wetland. So, and it's primarily fed by groundwater and surface water runoff, so that's how it came to be established, I would imagine. I'm sure it was wet conditions, but it got sustained that way over the years.
Further discussion before I make this very specific motion to get this done?
I got a question.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
The is that beyond the property line, that restoration, the red area?
Right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually,
Probably part of the road.
yeah, it's not really in the road layout. Well, I'm sorry, it is off the road shoulders, but it is part of the restoration.
And that's allowable to go outside the,
Yes. DPW is involved as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
I don't really see the road layout even called out on that,
Yeah.
on that plan. You know, that road is probably at least an 80-foot wide road layout.
Yeah.
That's a fairly recent town road. They're usually 50 to 60, sometimes going to 80, so.
Right.
Other questions and comments from the commissioners? Hearing none, making,
I would move as the chairman so stated, if I can get away
Or if you
with
want to
that.
hand that off to somebody else to read and they can make the motion.
I finally get to make a motion,
You
and you're
can-
going
you
to
can
take
make a
that from me,
motion.
Drew?
No, I forget what I said.
I would motion that the commission has deemed the wetland restoration to be completed in substantial compliance with the order of conditions issued for 161 Old Barnstable Road, DEP file number 432-2997, and hereby authorize the release of the $10,000 performance bond held by the town treasurer.
Second?
Thank you, Brad. Voting. Brian.
Yes.
Tom. Brad.
Yes.
Paul.
Yes.
Charlie.
Yes.
Alex.
Yes.
I vote aye as well. Motion carries.
Thank you.
That's a first.
So the next item up is the carryover from the last meeting where Alex had brought up a discussion. It relates to the joint select board meeting coming up, one that had taken place and the one coming up on Monday, about ideas for improving water quality in the town of Mashpee. So I'll just open it up to the commission. If anyone has any comments they wish to make, or if they're still trying to, work on what to have presented for the selectmen. And Caitlin had put in some suggesting, some ideas as well. I can put mine out there, and then we can have a discussion if that's.
Please.
So, I think that anyone who saw Dr. Brian House's presentation on the condition of water quality in Mashpee, the very dire forecast, and not something really that had any uplifting elements to it. But there were questions asked of Dr. House as far as, what can we do in the meantime while sewering is being implemented? And I think his first comment was speed up the sewering as much as you can, which makes perfect sense. But restoration of, wetland restoration was one of the other things that he had mentioned as something that could be done in the short term. So that's what and we have been working on that with Chopjake. That's something that I would put out there as far as a relatively short-term type of project to improve, initiative to improve water quality within contributing watersheds to water bodies, particularly inland water bodies, ones impacted like Santua Pond, which has a lot of bordering bogs that some of which are good candidates, just like Chopjake, for restoration. Some of my other suggestions would be at our boat ramps, some of which have been improved on DPW for a coastal, but our inland boat ramps really need a lot of, I think, upgrading, particularly in the arena of signage warning about the introduction of invasive species, invasive aquatics. This signage out at the one at John's Pond, it's bent over, it's barely readable. I think it's just improving that from a visibility standpoint, from a public education standpoint. Because if you're gonna go through the effort to try and improve water quality and other measures, only to have a compromise by the introduction of invasive species, which is relatively easy to control with, proper signage and public education, that would just be tragic. So, and I think that that's an important thing to consider moving forward when it comes to water quality and upgrading our town landings for our inland water bodies. So I haven't seen any come across this commission yet, and I hope to see that moving forward.
My thought after our joint meeting, truth be told, it was during the joint meeting, given that I sit on the Community Preservation Committee, which I think, if you're not familiar with, has funds that are dedicated towards historical preservation, affordable housing, conservation, and we've used those to fund some good stuff in each of those categories going forward. I think that land acquisition and having that land placed in conservation forwards the goal in the short term of protecting and improving water quality. Given that that's generally what we do as a commission, or part of what we do as a commission, I think identification of parcels that could be acquired that require improvement, something that has been damaged that could really benefit from restoration.
Absolutely.
I only had two things that came to my mind while I sat there listening, and one is just the simple need of pumping the existing septic systems in neighborhoods that are abutting such critical resource areas. I think that needs to be toughened up. I was shocked to hear that people, after 10, 15 years, haven't spent $400 to pump out the system. They're endangering the system, which could cost them $15,000, $20,000 plus to replace. They really ought to be doing it automatically. I just didn't I did it just before that meeting, really did, and found out that it had been 2 years. And I had been running at a 2-year cycle to pump my system. And maybe I wasn't doing it frequently enough, but when I heard that, it's like, that is delinquent, so bad.
Yeah.
That needs to be toughened up.
Yeah.
People should not have a choice.
I wonder how many homes aren't doing that because of financial concerns. And I wonder if there's, maybe as part of the affordable housing monies that we have, if it would be appropriate to identify and offer assistance to any families that really, a $400 pump out is a big kick in the pants.
Yeah, it's in the neighborhood. Mine, I think, was
Mine's about
$450
$350.
or something based upon.
Because I could see
gallons.
that, I agree, toughening that up would be a great way to go, but there's definitely some people in the
When the
town.
guy was pumping out, he says, I sometimes I charge a little bit extra because no one has kept track of what kind of vegetation you put on top of the tank or around the edges of the tank. And he said, that takes more time. That was another little thing, but,
Good idea.
The other one that comes to mind is that, we're always concerned about boaters coming in, using our ramps and whatever. I just say to myself, how much would it cost to build a little cement block restroom at the top of the ramps with a working, functional septic system there that could be closed down off-season, winterized, or whatever the case may be, and then you don't have the boats, or maybe that's where the boats pump into.
But yeah,
I
it could be a closed system where it gets pumped out just as a collection point, so
Yeah,
to speak.
exactly.
Yeah.
There's are you referring to the pump out boat?
Yeah.
The harbor master? Yeah, that's,
I'm sure they go to the proper kind of place.
It's
but
above and beyond that.
I'm just talking about having a relief station, if you wish, at those areas, rather than, the boats dumping their stuff someplace where it shouldn't be.
Right.
I don't know if it might help.
Making it easier to do the right thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Other commissioners?
I don't have an action item, but I guess I got a topic I'd like to bring up and just see what the reaction is. Clearly, from what I can see, and I've only been here for 5 years, and where I came from in Central Mass, there was a very serious water issue with the Nashua River watershed. I don't know if you're familiar with that at all. Paper mills in Fitchburg. And there was a lot of septic system issues. I mean, there was a ton of issues. And throughout the late 50s, all of the 60s, 70s, and even into the 80s, it took to finally clean that up. And one of the most common tools that I saw was temporary moratoriums on new construction. But I don't hear anyone, any board, any committee, any commission, looking at a moratorium. Clearly, our carrying capacity, we're just so far over it that, I mean, that's why we're all talking about this. The summer tourists last year never left because of the pandemic. So we've got a septic problem. And I don't know if anything we can do is good. But I don't know why we're not looking at a moratorium, because I think that's probably the most powerful tool that you can put down on the table. You know, and I don't know whose purview it is, whether it's selectmen, zoning, planning, building, maybe all of them. It certainly isn't our purview, I don't think, but I'm kind of puzzled why it hasn't come up yet.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Do you think it would be worth it, when we do present this to the select board, to have everybody say individual comments, or should we have everything submitted to Chad? Because I think that's an excellent point. I'm just
Yeah.
it kind of triggered my thought process to
I
say
think either way.
Well, I'll speak right up about moratoriums, because I've been here 30 years, and there have been movements for moratoriums. Obviously, my business would be tremendously affected, as well as our tax basis. Moratoriums aren't an answer. What is an answer is ultimately sewering. And if there was money and federal government, I was reading about, for example, the Boston Harbor cleanup is a good example of success, where the water quality was horrendous, and there was no hope. We're doomed. You know, our Boston Harbor is doomed, and yet, with federal money, with the proper, sewering, we all know the success of the Charles River and the cleanup. And what we're struggling, and mostly in this town, is not having the money to ultimately do that. Well, ultimately, you need the tax base. You need to be able to have that. There's a positive way to do that. All these homeowners are eventually going to be paying for this sewer upgrade over X amount of years. These are the same people who are improving their homes, Paul. When you do a tear down, you immediately have an upgrade in a septic system. In the new homes, they have much higher septic or even denite systems than an older home would have. So and as far as land use is gone, most of the land use has already been designated. In other words, that Cape Cod has very little land yet to be developed. We're essentially developing land since the 80s that has already been designated by lots and by developments. We haven't had a development for the most part since the 80s. It's already been laid out. So the amount of development that's as far as moratoriums go, you would see that there's very little impact that would have in a positive way. I think it's really important to encourage people to upgrade their systems, to get behind water quality. One of my things I saw at Sanibel Island, we're talking about picking in the littoral zone, like proper plant material that could encourage filtration of nitrogen, for example. I thought, well, that's a conservation thing that we could insist upon. And research plant material that really does filtration. In the same way the mangroves, are super filters and allow breeding in St. Thomas and St. John. There's got to be ways that we can find plant material and include it and require it. There's also, could we go into some of these littoral zones on these waterfront properties and, create more filtration? The other thing they talked about in Sanibel and some of these other communities are floating wetlands. That's an interesting thing. If we're doing aquaculture in the bays, could we not somehow create at the same time in these areas some filtering floating wetlands? And so I think the thing is, it's important to be positive. It's ultimately going to be a positive reaction to get people on board. I think we also should be doing education as far as mailings. The town should be mailing on a regular basis, because I know even with some of my customers who are not regularly here or second homeowners, they don't know how often to pump their system. And perhaps regular mailings and advertising and these kinds of things saying, remember to pump your system, it's as simple as that. I don't think that everyone's looking to be not compliant. I think some people are just ignorant of how often to take care of that. And they're thinking, well, I'm only here, very sporadically. So I think that's another thing is education in a positive way. And I think it's really important to be positive about this, because remember, these systems were permitted by this town of Mashpee. And so these homeowners, that they're not criminals because their systems are failures. These systems were passed and they were installed and they were approved by this town over the years, and now we have a problem. And I think it's important to say, we approved that, but now we're going to have to get more upgrades, and you're going to have to do it more. There also may be a way through some of these septic approved installers and maintain people in this town to get people that insist that they have payment plans. In other words, make sure that any installer in our town somehow has allow them to pay over a 3-year period or something. I don't know how that would be done, but in other words, they're talking about affordability of $400. Well, maybe there's a way to do that and bracket it, that it has to be done every 3 years, and that payment plan would be over that 3 years. So I think it's important to realize that the town allowed these systems to be installed. The people just have to realize that now there's a critical problem, but I think it's important to be positive. And I know that moratoriums specifically, which have been put forth 3 times over a 30-year period that I've been here, have ultimately been voted down, and because people realized the effect that it would have on the town itself, and it wouldn't be positive, nor would it be for Cape Cod. That is not the solution. The solution ultimately is to get sewers in place, not in, also in Mashpee, in Sanibel Island, into all these places that are having water quality. You look nationally, there are places all across the country that are having the same problems, whether it's Cape Cod, Florida, or in the heartland around along a river. Yep. There simply hasn't been enough money for sewering, and it's not unique to Cape Cod. It's a national issue, and it's all based on money. I went to the Sewer Commission for 5 years being the liaison from the business community, and you realized at that time that it all came down to money. And you could spend money on engineering, but until there were billions of dollars, nothing would change. And so I think the conservation issues like the plants and floating wetlands are these things that are immediate that we could implement, perhaps.
I don't disagree with what you're saying, Tom, but I see it as a tool, another tool in the box, and when we're in such a dire situation that we are now, and we weren't these other times that a moratorium perhaps was proposed, I think it's a viable tool. I don't see it as negative. I'm not saying an all-out ban of everything. What I'm saying is a temporary moratorium on new construction. We can't keep up with what we presently have. And I know you're saying it's all about money, but the environment is worth more than money. It's as simple as that. You know, I'm not some kid that just came out of college. I lived my entire life protecting the environment. I've seen situations a hell of a lot worse than Mashpee. Look at that National River Watershed Association case study. Pathetic. I mean, we're talking about a river that's bright red, bright green, bright yellow. Today you can fish and eat the trout out of that river. And moratoriums played a critical role in bringing that environment back. It's a timeout. If you're playing a game and you're down by 50 points, the first thing the coach does is time out. Pull the people off the field. What are we doing wrong? And again, I don't disagree with anything you've said, but what I do disagree with is it shouldn't be all about the money. It should be about the environment. That's what we're here to protect. We are stewards of the planet. And if we can't look beyond money, then what are we doing?
My point is,
What are
Paul,
we
you
doing?
can have a moratorium, but if you don't have the billions of dollars at that time to install the sewers that are needed, what's the point? What is the point? We need the billions of dollars, and that is coming, hopefully, at some point.
Would there be, would it make sense to potentially suggest a moratorium on new Title Vs versus new development that will be hooked into existing wastewater treatment plants?
Well, that would stop everything.
Well, any new development that would be tied into a wastewater treatment plant versus a new individual Title V septic system. And I'm not saying this is necessarily how I'm not exactly sure how I feel on it. I understand it's a tricky subject, lot at stake. But it's a thought. It's a thought.
Possibility that, I mean, because there are existing water treatment plants that are not at their full capacity. So if you were to implement a degree of moratorium, whatever it happens to be, that could be an area, an arena to offset any economic impacts by you still allowing some development, but it's not going to make things worse. You're tying into existing water treatment plants. So you're basically tying them into sewering in areas where it's available. It is, I mean, I think all ideas are great so far, that as far as, you know, putting them out there and.
Yeah, I mean, there's a
having,
variety of ways to look at it, but I think it should be considered. It should be thrown up as a topic and
Yeah,
see
and
how the other boards feel about it.
I suppose it would be something that we could, in theory, support on some level. But I think that the select board would want us to really focus within our abilities, what we're capable of doing within our commission.
Right.
Yeah.
You speak very knowledgeably about the Nashua River. I lived in Groton, and, you know, that river.
So you know Marion Stoddard, because she was in Groton.
Yeah, and the lady who drove the whole change to that attitude came from Groton, and it's many years ago now in my head, but I mean, one of the things, we used to get down to the Nashua River to watch the crew races come down through there, and one time you go down there and it would be green, the next time you get down there it'd be a different color, depended upon which factory upstream
Paper
was
mills in
dumping
Fitchburg,
what
whatever color
chemical.
paper they
This
were
was-
making. Yep.
Right?
I'm from Pepperell. I
Okay, so you dumped in before we got it, but
You
anyway.
guys know what I'm talking about. I
But
mean,
there's,
this is not
I
a new
think,
problem here.
there's, when without condemning or condoning the concept of a moratorium, the other impacts, that freezes the growth of the problem, obviously. The impacts other than Tom outlined, which are significant. We are a town that benefits from a well-heeled populace that consumes virtually nothing in our services, but pays a large amount of our property tax. But to put that aside and the money issue aside, there's a different money issue on the opposite end. When we clamp down on the supply of any commodity, and the demand remains the same, we increase that demand, and we increase that price. So when we talk about the crisis of affordable housing, which I, for one, struggle to say that when I have my conservation hat on, I would call that a secondary concern to the environment. When I'm standing in my friend's kid's house that is struggling with their family to get by, especially in this era, it's kind of hard for me to see it as secondary. So a moratorium would have another economic impact on the other side of the tax bracket spectrum. Perhaps part of that conversation becomes a softer way, a way to incentivize construction that ties into a new septic system. When you see a benefit, probably economic, to the builder of the homes and the people developing a lot to focus on development with existing sewerage, maybe that's a less heavy-handed way of accomplishing something in the way of benefit. At least it's part of the discussion, I would feel.
Yeah.
I have a question. Are there any rules in place currently that limit how much of a lot can be cleared before it's built upon?
No.
I believe was it acre?
Only the flood zone under our regulation 25, if a lot is completely within the flood
Yeah.
zone. Or if it's an undeveloped lot, we do also have the 50-foot
Yeah, so
buffer
there's-
zone.
There's language that does, amongst a couple of different regulations, that restricts how much of a lot you can
And the
clear.
Riverfront Act, too.
Riverfront Act,
But-
yeah.
But
Didn't the
that's
Board of
within-
Selectmen
like
vote,
every-
though? Like
Like,
an
when
acre,
look
you
at
can't
new
build on
lots in
anything less than an
town
acre,
where
right?
People are doing these new buildings, and they just clear up to their property line. Like, that's getting to the issue of there not being enough vegetation to filter what that property is ultimately going to be adding in
Right.
to the environment.
Yeah.
So maybe if there's a way to have buffers for everybody with their neighbors, or a house, if a house is to go on a lot, no more than 50% of the lot can be cleared for construction, or whatever it be, but just a way to get more trees. I mean, it feels like, gosh, especially after all the last storms we've had, even with COVID, before really storms hit, it felt like everyone who spent time at home was suddenly cutting down trees in their yard because they were getting some projects that they wanted to do or whatever. But in my neighborhood, we lost a lot of trees. And to that point, I would add that I really want us to be aware of any town projects or town building projects that are going on. I know they're hoping that the sewering, the excess, like, water or whatever, the water discharge zones for the sewer will go at Willow Bend. But if something happens where Willow Bend doesn't end up agreeing to it, and they do turn to town of Mashpee land, we need to look at that land and how it was purchased, the intent of the purchases, like, look at the deeds thoroughly to make sure that, a year or two down the road, we're not coming up against our other town departments and being like, hey, you can't do this. We need to know that sooner rather than later. But I would also say we need to advocate to keep the trees there so they don't just become swamplands where they're dumping this water. So trees. And then just while I have the floor for one more second, because it's hard because I can't see you guys. I can only see Drew. I mean, you're great, but it's hard because I can't see everyone. But the other thing I want to bring up, I created a list. Oh, hi. I created a list of all the groups that do conservation or land acquisition for conservation that operate in the town of Mashpee. So we're unique in that we don't have a group that specifically focuses only on Mashpee. We fall within a lot of different group zones. So I created a list of, and I'll give that to you guys, but all the groups that are working on land acquisition within the town of Mashpee for conservation and what their missions are, because they're all different. So depending, that might help us shape how we look at partnering or look at acquiring land. If there's a specific focus that one group has, we might go to them first over another.
Sure.
But just to start getting some of that thinking going. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
Due to the handicap of web delays, Brian was making a point just before you made yours, and I'd like to give him a chance to return to that.
All right, thanks, Mr. Chair. So I think that when we talk about a lot of this stuff, we talk about, the town, and they've kind of been kicking the can down the road, so to speak. And it's kind of a harder pill for me to swallow as a tribal citizen, because of the simple fact is this is why the tribe sued the town back in the 70s. It wasn't about the overdevelopment and everything else. It was because we knew that our waterways would get to the point where they are today. When we talk about money and everything else like that, that's also a hard pill to swallow, because the town sits there and has millions of dollars that goes into the reserve every year that gets pushed back from the departments that don't use their funds. CPC is also sitting on a couple millions of dollars. If you went to the last town meeting, you heard how much money was in the reserve for the CPC funds. And I think that it's on all of us. It's all of our issue here. I know that we did work on it when we were working on the bylaw subcommittee group. We talked about the docks, and we talked about implementing the fee, and we had talked about it. We talked about the fact that we could only charge them one time, and I had asked Drew to look into it, and he said that we couldn't really charge them annually. We can only charge them once because of the situation that we're in. If there were other, I guess, legalities or things for us to stand on. And I think that one of the biggest issues that we have is the fact that our waters are some of the poorest waters in the Commonwealth. So I think that that's something that we can revisit. The mitigation, the shellfish mitigation, the things that we're doing. I think it's great to talk about, the environment and the natural resources. If we have more cattails, the cattails are supposed to sit there and they're supposed to filter out the bays and the rivers and stuff. We have a lot of phragmites and invasive species and stuff that we have here now. And I think that that all kind of contributes to it. And also to Brad's kind of point to talk about the boats and so on and so forth. There's no washing stations or anything like that at any of our boat ramps. So Mashpee is polluted because of the simple fact that all of these people that sit out there and they bring their boats out there, out in the ocean, they have to go and rinse their engines out in the ponds, in the body of waters, and that's how we get the invasive species in our waterways. So I do kind of understand, Paul's point with a moratorium and stuff like that, but maybe, we need to put a moratorium on the ponds and stuff like that. I mean, just like we just did with a Schumann, I believe, with the jet ski ban and the water ban that we're doing. I think that some of those steps are steps that we should probably take, and I think that we can actually take within our purview versus just, kind of saying that, it's money or this, that, and the third. And I think that we actually can come up with a lot more solutions, I think, if we work collectively. So, yeah, that's just a couple points.
Yeah. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Yeah, those are great points.
What else can we mine out of this brain trust tonight?
I just had one quick, just item, it's a few items. Other people have already mentioned them more or less, but continue to enforce mitigation buffer zone enhancement per Regulation 327 and 29. More public outreach regarding the Wetlands Protection Act. Distribute brochures to realtors, that's something we were kicking around. And to your point, Tom, too, of more mailings, more information to people just to be aware of jurisdiction.
I
And
was wondering, why isn't there something, for example, like Mass Save does insulation?
Right.
Why is there something that wouldn't be like that would help owners, who, for example, to convert
Right.
to a better system?
Yeah.
A better system.
Right. And like you said, it's not that they're the enemy, they're just not knowledgeable of the impact. So creating there's already a brochure that kind of is a snapshot of the Wetlands Protection Act, because that happens a lot too, is the ignorance of the Wetlands Protection Act. And that, oh, I just clear cut the 50-foot buffer. I had no idea. I'm from the city. I didn't know you guys had that kind of rule out here. Or informing people of jurisdiction in the flood zone because it's more than 100 feet away from the water. That is the benchmark for most people who are aware of wetlands protection. If I'm outside 100 feet, I'm good to go. No, you're not. And so it's just, putting this type of information in a brochure and getting it out to the masses will be part of that
And
education.
I think we need education days, really, and all of us need to be involved in that.
Yeah, I think we can look at creating positions too to help the conservation, department or natural resources. I think sometimes they try to rely a lot on these departments who only have a handful of employees, and maybe that's what we need to do. Now that we have a sewer department and all this other stuff that we're doing now, maybe that's something we can do to help Drew and Caitlin too, versus giving back whatever's left in the conservation department funds at the end of the year. Maybe we start, helping them with the planning in that and say, hey, listen, we'd like to hire a person to do the educational pieces and the stuff, so the burden's not on, the department.
Perhaps that could be paid through a rebate in taxes too, for example. In other words, where as an incentive, just like people who get an incentive to work for the town, for example.
Sure.
Maybe there's a $500 rebate towards your taxes if you upgrade, being creative in that way.
I just had a couple more, just support DNR's efforts to create harbor management plan to regulate boat use, docks, and any of the other suggestions made tonight that we may not be able to directly implement. As the Conservation Commission, we of course could offer our wholehearted support to the project in any way, shape, or form that is feasible, support letters or otherwise. And I just wanted to just get clarification. Did we all want to submit our comments to Chad, or the commission to Chad for the meeting on Monday, just to have a game plan for that, or does everybody want to say a piece?
I'm fine with Chad.
Yeah, I think it'd be more organized.
Yeah.
Okay, so just if everyone could just make a point.
Can we get clarification from who's the chair of the selectmen or select board that was running the meeting, what she would want us to do?
Carol Sherman is the
Yeah.
current chair, yeah.
My money would be on she would want a concise summary.
Probably want it, just like it was suggested, it makes the most sense, I think, just, so it's.
What did she want? I didn't, when she was asking it felt vague. How did you take what she suggested? Was it just each board comes with like a
home and come
concise
up with
thing, or
ideas.
how did you take it?
Items, I think is what she stated.
She said several action items. I thought she said 7 action items. That's how I heard it.
Yes.
But yeah, she
She did.
said several action items, and we didn't receive further guidance since then.
Yeah, okay.
Enough teeth in it. 'Cause today I had a conversation with some folks that
Oh.
live here.
But on the agenda that she sent out, Carrie Cook sent out today, it's not even on the agenda.
It's not on the agenda, no, it's not, but hopefully someone will bring up, because I think it was a very, good
As a
point to
commission,
make.
we can show some leadership and bring it up.
Right, there you go.
There you go, like it. Oh, and one more,
This is a really great thing that I would also thought about too.
yeah, this really was Drew's idea, was to add a climate change regulation into a bylaw, and I had looked into this in the past, and I know Horsley Witten was working on it for one of the towns, I think it may have been Eastham. I'll have to revisit that and see if that'd be something we could implement.
What would a climate change regulation look? Can you give me an example of what that might be?
I think it would, I know that the MACC has a model bylaw about climate change. I haven't had an opportunity to read it yet. It would probably involve a significant amount of umbrella language and not really getting bogged down into specific regulations, or it could, but, or maybe lending more weight to existing regulations, something to that effect, and tying it into the recent, data collection that reinforces that climate change is happening as a result of man-made activities. So, relying on that science, bringing that into a model bylaw. And, but I haven't read the MACC model bylaw. I'm going to do that just because I am really interested in that, the possibility of coming up with a climate change bylaw. We just need to tie it to just like every other regulation that we have tied to, specific data and scientific literature, and so that it doesn't come off as just being arbitrary based on unsound reasoning, just like any bylaw should be, so.
And that would already be in
Yeah,
line
I
with the bylaw review subcommittee that's already been formed. This would just be an additional item to add to that. So continuing the efforts to strengthen our bylaw.
What are you going to say, Alex?
Well, it's hard. I guess I don't know what our bylaw subcommittee has been working on, so I can ask you about that on the side rather than take up time right now. But I would just be curious, looking at some of the bylaws that other towns around us have. I get the feeling that Mashpee is I get the feeling that we are very much like yes people. Like, we say yes to every project that comes in front of us, and in other towns they would be no's. So I'm just curious, I guess, how we can tighten up some things just to have better buffer zones, and get some more of that vegetation filtering in between projects and stabilizing the banks and kind of all of that. So, but I can talk to you more about that from the side.
Okay.
Alex, could you educate us? It sounds like because of your other life, that you hear a lot of rejections, and maybe we could learn something from that if we gave you 5 or 10 minutes to explain why you made that statement as to why we're all yes people, and we should be a little bit tougher on our applicants as well. I mean, I want to learn if in fact that's true. I hear stories about other towns who they may be bigger towns than ours, but their Conservation Commission meetings will carry over from one meeting to another meeting, and the first meeting ends at 12 o'clock at night, after starting at 6 or 7 o'clock at night, because of the orneriness of the people on the boards. They just argue about everything. As I've been told by one person that comes to mind who sat on this board and then had reason to be in other towns and see that.
I'd like to add to what Brad said, well, I'm just going to say what I think. I think Drew and Caitlin do an excellent job of finding a reasonable alternative that serves our bylaws as written, as well as within reason allowing people to do what they want with their own property. That statement is obviously constrained by the need to maintain our environment, the dire need of our water quality. However, I can say with complete honesty, the only reason I sit on this commission is because of how impressed I was by Drew's ability to be what we need more of in government, which is looking for the answer that serves all parties rather than have a combative, partisan environment that poisons our towns.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you that Drew and Caitlin do an excellent job. I think I was speaking more, to other, like in Falmouth, we have permitted docks that would never fly in Falmouth. And not that I'm looking to be combative or tell people no, but like sometimes the environment should come first, and we should be able to say no. So looking at what our bylaws really say, and if we do have any changes, knowing that it's okay for someone to come in front of us and ask for something, and for us to say, no, sorry, that doesn't work there. So I guess that's kind of just what I'm speaking to, but I wholeheartedly agree that Drew's homework before every meeting makes it so much easier, and we do get done a lot faster because of that. So thank you, really.
There's always opportunity to strengthen regulatory language, because you don't want the commission to feel handcuffed just by their own regulations as they're currently worded. And then you hear that a lot from the consultants saying, well, this is what it says in your reg, and you just approved this, a couple of weeks ago or whatever, even though I really can't stand hearing that line of reasoning. It has no bearing. Every project is based on its own merits. But yeah, there's always opportunity to increase, the teeth of the regulations, and I agree with that. And also, you know, in addition to that, you know, making sure that when we are working with our current regulations, that we condition the projects accordingly. Because I have heard, you know, I go to agent network meetings, and I've heard a lot of horror stories about commissioners that are tough, using their regulations, and end up getting embroiled in many lawsuits.
Legal.
That's
Yeah.
happened in Falmouth. In fact, I think they were sued over $1 million for a denial that was based on arbitrary and capricious reasoning. So
Right.
you really want to be careful to avoid that. And one of the ways to, you know, to get what the commission needs to get, which is improved environmental protection, is to strengthen the regulations, but based
Right.
on sound reasoning. And that's definitely an important
Right.
thing moving forward.
Wind turbines come to mind.
Okay.
All right, in the interest of advancing the meeting, unless any of us have a Nobel Prize winning idea, I think we've done enough brainstorming, and we should proceed with the rest of our items.
Sure.
Is that okay for the commissioners? That was a
Yes.
pretty broad statement. All right.
Okay, so I'll just run through, I'll have Caitlin cover the Choptic log update. Nothing, well, the Charles River Falmouth Rod and Gun Club submitted a report, final report to the Community Preservation Act Committee, which has been dispersed to us, and I will forward that to the commissioners so you can read up on the whole summary of their restoration project. Red Brick Road Culvert, good news, the town qualified for the DER's Culvert Replacement Grant Program. We still haven't heard about the Priority Projects Grant, but we qualified for technical assistance from DER, and that may lead to funding assistance as well. But technical assistance is certainly needed when it comes to the Red Brick Road Culvert. So that's good news, and that was a last-minute thing that popped up on the radar. Catherine, DPW, jumped on.
Everybody
DPW
likes
jumped
it
on
now because it's green, if
It's
nothing
it
else.
looks
It's
beautiful.
flourishing, absolutely flourishing. We got
Picture of
grass
what
coming out
we
of
would
our
ultimately
ears.
like to see out there, so
Yeah.
it's,
have to do
still got to deal with the culvert issue. I can't leave it like that. I will be getting dates out this month for scheduling our next bylaw review committee, and Alex, if you want to join that, were you part of the committee? I couldn't remember off the top of my head. But we would welcome you to
No, I
join
don't
if you,
think I
if you'd
think
like.
I came on after you guys formed.
Okay, well,
But I'd be happy to just sit
Yeah.
and listen.
absolutely. Let's see. Johns Pond Milfoil final report should be coming at the end of this month at the year-end summary and recommendations for any additional treatment based on the outcome of this year's round of treatment, where they hit most, if not all, of the milfoil based on their initial survey. So I'll hand it over to Caitlin for chop take.
As the conservation restriction has been sent to EEA for approval, then we'll go to commission and select board for final approval. The contract with the inland fee program has been extended to February 28th to allow time for this to occur, as we do need to get it recorded as well. We're awaiting Phase 2 draft contract for final design and plans, and then eventually we'll move into Phase 3 for construction. We're also looking at some additional funding opportunities to fully implement the Cadillac version of the restoration. Thank you.
Caitlin, I have a question. When are we voting on the conservation restriction for the Chopchick Bog?
It has to come back to us after it's reviewed from EEA.
State has
Okay.
to approve it first, then it goes to Concom, then it goes to the selectmen, then it gets implemented.
Recorded, yeah.
Recorded.
If we had any edits to that document, when is the time to add it? Or is it past?
It's more or less past at this point.
The terror
Yeah.
in Caitlin's eyes tell me it's past.
Sorry, it's just been a lot of, it's been reviewed.
It's been reviewed
Yeah, and
back
I
and forth so many times, it's, in my mind, not to say that, the commission obviously can still weigh in on it, but I think what you're gonna find is a highly refined conservation restriction that hasn't skipped a beat. It's only been enhanced.
So it looks awesome. It looks really great. The only thing when I was looking at it that I don't know if we have an opportunity to talk about this, but it is our property. We own it, and if we're putting a restriction on it, it's ideally in perpetuity.
Yeah.
So it takes an act of like Congress to get it changed. Not really, but it's a big deal to try and change that document. So the only word I would add into it is accessible before trails. If in 50 years from now, the trail system in there, the town of Mashpee has the money and wants to put in an accessible trail, right now, the way that document is worded, I think it would hinder that from happening. We've had it happen on properties that I help manage, and we can't continue an accessible pathway for people in wheelchairs or with strollers because of the way it's worded.
Right.
So just adding the word like accessible, if that's a sentiment that the Concom feels, because certainly if you have to pave or do something to a path to make it accessible, it is a bigger impact on the environment. But at least you're getting a broader base of people out in the woods. So
Sure.
just something to think about.
Yeah, I
But
think
Caitlin, the document does look awesome. It does.
you can thank Mark Robinson of the Compact for that. He's the one that does a lot of these CRs for us. But Caitlin has done yeoman's work in making sure that it gets reviewed from all parties and extending deadlines.
We can ask all parties involved if that's a minor enough change to not require another full-scale review.
Yeah, and I think it should be. I agree. It's a good point.
It is a good point,
And especially
absolutely.
if that parcel where it really lends itself for, it's nice and flat, and it could be a very suitable parcel for that type of access for.
We good?
Mr. Chairman, I'd move for adjournment.
I would enthusiastically encourage a second.
Second.
Thank you, Brian. Voting, Brian,
Yes.
Tom,
Aye.
Brad,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Charlie. Alex.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.